Oh, goody.
All right, what's going on, everybody? Zombies here again, and today we're back with another Marvel Snap video. So today I wanted to talk about an interesting topic that I've talked about a bit on stream before, and I thought it could be an interesting discussion for YouTube as well. That is RNG and Marvel Snap, what the game gets right and what the game gets wrong, in my opinion. So what is RNG? RNG is random number generation, and it really is just a shorthand term for randomness. And I think it's kind of fascinating with Snap because Snap in a lot of ways gets how it does RNG right pretty much, I think, perfectly, or as close to perfect as you can have it in terms of the gameplay of the game. RNG has always been very inherent to card games, whether it be Hearthstone, Magic, more traditional card games like poker. Randomness plays a core element of what we as card gamers really tend to enjoy about these kind of games. And so that's kind of like now, you know, we're in this meta where things are a little bit stale and we aren't feeling that same kind of variety that is often, you know, provided by the RNG. So I wanted to talk a bit about what I think Snap gets right and what I think it gets wrong. And so starting off with the good, I think Snap really nails the gameplay RNG aspect. Now in the thumbnail, you saw I have the locations, and those are some RNG locations, specifically like Ego, Sakar, ones that have kind of a more random outcome. But the thing is, it's really not just about, let's say, the locations that have some kind of random outcome. I think the locations themselves do a great job of injecting a level of randomness into each game that keeps it kind of fresh, so it doesn't get too stale like you're playing the same thing over and over and over again. And in a game where cards are not coming out at a breakneck pace, you know, we get what? 4 cards a month, and only one of those 4 cards is more accessible to most of the player base. So they really needed to find a way to make the gameplay stay fresh without the traditional card game model of just releasing a big expansion of cards every 3 or 4 months. I've put in, like 700 almost 800 hours, I think, on Snap, just on Steam alone. That's not counting time during the beta. That's not counting time I've played on mobile devices, which I'm sure probably makes this number almost double. And I still find myself coming back to the game on a pretty much daily basis. And a big reason for that is because it doesn't feel stale. It doesn't feel like I'm just going through the motions. And I feel like that is kind of a place where a lot of people get with other card games. I know I have in the past, where even though sometimes they're releasing new expansions and new cards, at a certain point sometimes things feel kind of stale. And I feel like the location system by design really helps with that, because not only are we getting a handful of new cards, but we're getting these new locations. And the fact that you have 3 locations in a game, every time we're getting a new location, the possibility of combinations of different locations goes up by a ton. And then you have locations where, you know, one will inversely affect another one. And it just makes it really interesting and keeps the gameplay very dynamic and feels like there's always kind of something new to experience, even for people who've played the game for hundreds or thousands of hours. So I think that is really the biggest thing that Snap succeeds with in RNG, and it's such a huge part of why I think so many people, myself included, really enjoy this game, because there are a lot of other card games where I've liked them, but after, you know, a couple hundred or 1,000 hours, which is a lot of time, eventually things start to just get a little boring, get a little, you know, repetitive. And I really feel like I haven't felt that way nearly as much with Snap, despite putting in pretty crazy amount of time with the game. Now there are other positive RNG elements like RNG on cards and whatnot. I think they generally, at least with the cards we have so far, have got that pretty right. I don't think there's really too much to say there, because I don't think The way they do RNG on cards in this game is really that different than a lot of other card games. It really is the location system that I think makes this game as fun and as interesting as it is, even if sometimes the locations can be a little frustrating, particularly ones that impact you in a negative way, like Subterranea, like Sakar randomly discarding, the card you want. Even if the experience isn't always a positive one, I think in the grand scheme of things, this is kind of the biggest part of their gameplay loop that they absolutely nailed, and the biggest success RNG in Marvel Snap. That aside, not everything is perfect with RNG in this game, and I find it so interesting that for a game that seems to really have nailed the RNG element in its gameplay, the RNG element in the collection system is far from perfect or even optimal. And what do I mean by this? So the collection system is something, a lot of people have a lot of different opinions about it, but I know myself and most people I know who have come from other card games, that is and has been the biggest kind of complaint is the RNG of this system. People want to get access to cards that they're interested in, and it feels like there's just too much randomness going on. We especially saw this in beta and early on in launch in Pool 3, when there was no way to go after a specific card you wanted to acquire before the addition of the token shop. Now, the token shop has helped a bit, but the token shop also has a kind of negative RNG to it, where yes, it's a way you can kind of target a card you want, but you have to wait until it randomly decides to show up. And that can be a pretty long wait, especially if you are new or early on in Pool 3. It can take forever for a specific card to show up, and you don't really have any agency over that. And that is definitely a feels bad kind of RNG, because it feels like it's out of my hands. I need to pray to Flannel Jesus himself that he will grace my shop with the one card I'm looking for. This is also frustrating for people like me who create content around the game, where, let's say, that new Master Mold card just came out, and I don't really have much agency over the fact that it didn't show up in my shop the other day. So if I wanted to buy it, well, too bad. I wasn't lucky enough to be able to do that, even though I do have the tokens in the reserve and waiting. Pool 3 is only kind of the tip of the iceberg with this RNG negativity in Snap. As well, it's not ideal. It doesn't feel like it's the worst element of RNG in the game. Where it gets really bad is Pool 5. Where things get really bad with RNG, though, is some of the newer cards in Snap, particularly with the Pool 5 system that was added a few months ago. Pool 5 is how all new cards currently enter the game, before they rotate down to Pool 4 and then eventually Pool 3. Your chance of pulling a Pool 5 card from a collector's reserve is 0.25%, or 1 in 400. And there is no pity timer, so to speak, on this. I know many people who have over 10,000 collection level, which is well above where I'm at, despite putting in a bunch of time and money into the game, who have never naturally opened a Pool 5 card. And this is, I think, the worst aspect of RNG in the entire game, because it kind of forces most players to have to rely on the token shop if they want to acquire a new card. When, according to the developers, that wasn't even the full intention of the token shop to begin with. The token shop was made to provide some agency, but according to them, it was never meant as the main way for you to acquire cards. But with cards at these super inflated rarities, where you almost will never open one, it's the only reliable method you have agency over trying to get this card. So 0.25%, it's just really, really insane that it's so rare, and this is where the feel bad comes in. So I am just under 8,000 collection level, and I have been really lucky under this system. I have gotten 3 Pool 5 cards, Shuri, Thanos, and Null. and that was great and all. But the Pool 5 experience, you'd think, well, 0.25 chance, if someone does get it, it should be a huge positive, right? But not all Pool 5 cards are created equally, and since every new card outside of the Battle Pass that is going into the game is starting in Pool 5, you get some cards in there that aren't really good, and then that's a really feels bad moment when someone's been wanting to acquire Thanos, and they get their 0.25 pull, and it's Shauna, or Dazzler, or Shadow King, or one of these other cards that really isn't that great and doesn't feel like it's deserving of that super rare status. So this is kind of the biggest thing that I think is a problem in Snap. Pool 5 is obviously the worst part of it, but I think that also extends down to, let's say, like Pool 4, where, again, not all cards are created equal, and though Pool 4 cards aren't as rare as Pool 5 cards, it can still be a bad experience when you're going after one you really want, let's say Bast, or Valkyrie, or Shuri, and instead, randomness dictates that you get M'Baku. And this gets further compounded by the fact that, we know these series drops are happening. It feels even worse when, let's say, you open M'Baku now when you know he's rotating down to Pool 3 in a week, and he basically just stole a card pull from you that you would have preferred to be something else. And this also encourages something that the developers have said they don't want, which is people hoarding boxes. I'm Pool 4 complete, so if I were to open what would be a Pool 4 card, instead it just gives me a roll on some tokens. That's not really worth it to me when instead of getting a Pool 4 card, which is valued at 3,000 tokens in the token shop, instead the game will give me 200 to 600 tokens. Not worth it at all. So there's no real reason for me to open up these reserves, and that gets more compounded by the fact that the odds of opening a Pool 5 card are so low. It's not like I'm opening the reserves with the chance to get that, because you have a better chance of winning the lottery. So this is one of the biggest issues in Marvel Snap. A lot of people have talked about it, and I thought it was just really interesting to kind of compare and contrast here with how a game gets so much right in terms of its gameplay, but gets so much wrong in terms of its collection system when it comes to the random element of it. Now, this isn't the only example in the game where I think randomness can be feels bad and can be improved upon. I think another big example with this is the season pass caches that you get after level 50. So currently those are a random experience, and sometimes you get boosters, and as we saw, people hate getting boosters from caches. That's why they changed the system so that no longer happens on the main collection track. But you can get boosters, you can get credits, gold, or if you're really lucky, you could get a variant. Now, without the boosters, I think people really wouldn't have as much of a problem with the RNG in this system, because it would at least feel like they're getting something valuable. At least, even if their RNG was, not quite as good, where they got a smaller amount of credits or a smaller amount of gold compared to the most you could get, at least you're getting something that is guaranteeing you progression. And boosters don't really feel that way at all, because boosters are not a resource that is kind of regulated so heavily, where it's the bottleneck. Most people have more than enough boosters to do with what they want with them, unless you're trying to split them a million times, then that can take a while. But most people have enough boosters. The booster is not the limiter here. The limiter is credits, the limiter is gold, the limiter is collector's tokens. So finding a way to make people feel like there is always some kind of meaningful progression being made, rather than these boosters, which a lot of people view as essentially worthless, even more so when they're random boosters, where it might not even be for a card you want to upgrade, I think would be a huge improvement to the system. Now, they have talked about wanting and needing to improve the system. I think it's very clear that a card game can't really be sustained off not letting people get excited about the new cards, which is kind of where we're at right now. I know as someone who creates a lot of content about the game, what typically happens is in the first day or two, people are very interested in seeing the new card because they want to know, hey, is this something worth saving up for or not? And that makes sense. You know, when tokens are such a valuable resource, people want to be spending it correctly and not wasting it. So that makes sense. But afterwards, what I've seen happen is people really don't like to see these new cards because even if they're interested in them, it creates a kind of frustration. And that frustration comes from the fact that you see something cool and you want to use it, but you can't use it. So why would I watch something that has something I think looks cool and just makes me want to use it, but brings with it this frustration and reminder that, oh yeah, I can't use it. And maybe in like 3 or 4 months, I can get around to using it. But by then, there's going to be another shiny new card that I might want more. So it creates this really big feeling of frustration, and I think it's really bad for the players, it's bad for the creators, it really feels kind of bad for everybody. Now, we are getting some changes, we don't know what those changes are, but we're getting some kind of changes to the collector token system, as well as the shop in the coming update next week, as well as I think the following patch in April. So I'm going to remain hopefully optimistic that they realize the full extent of how big of a problem this is to the game and how it really limits what is otherwise a really amazing card game. You know, I know a lot of players who have quit the game in Pool 3, and the biggest reason they cite is the RNG elements of the collection system, whether that be getting the Pool 3 cards they want or not being able to get access to new cards that look exciting to them. I think this is the biggest hurdle for them to overcome, and I hope they can do it. You know, one thing that comes up a lot is, well, the whole reason they have this system is to encourage people to whale. And while that's true to an extent, I think the gameplay design actually pushes away a lot of that whale demographic that they would be mainly interested in. Because people who want to whale on Marvel Snap, if you just pick up the game and you want to advance your collection, it doesn't matter if you have, you know, an infinitely high number of dollars to spend, you're still gated by time. And that is something that turns a lot of the super whale people off, because they're used to being able to skip that time with money. And that's not something you can do in Marvel Snap fully. You can make it faster, but you can't just immediately skip to, let's say, the end of Pool 3. That's just not something the game allows you to do. So it feels like they're really, if that was the way they wanted to go, they're not even successfully fully appealing to that audience either. And I think that is also a problem because let's say, you know, someone wants to get into the game now, especially if they want to get into something like content creation. I have no idea how you do that. I have no clue how someone who just wants to get started today could ever reasonably feel like they could catch up without having to spend months as well as hundreds of dollars. And that's kind of concerning because for games like this, I think it's really important that they're accessible and that there are pathways for new people to enter the creation space around it. And I think these kind of negative RNG elements, as well as just a lot of the negative elements of the collection system as a whole, really is a huge limiting factor on making what I think is one of the best card games out there, just not able to reach its full potential in its current form. So those are kind of my thoughts. I thought this was an interesting topic to talk about, and especially after seeing all the comments yesterday, my video going over is Master Mold worth buying or not. I thought this is something people would enjoy, but I'd like to hear from you. I'd like to hear, do you feel similarly about this system? Do you feel differently? Let me know in the comments below. That is going to wrap it up for this one. If you enjoyed it, remember to like and subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.